Now, next up, we're going to go to the next position. We're going to talk about wide receiver targets. So these are the wide receivers. Same thing. We're going to do 3 categories. We're going to do the deep leagues, the medium leagues, the shallow leagues. So in deep leagues, who I'm putting up here is Jalen Coker. And you might be surprised because I heard Carolina's on a bye. Yes, they are on a bye, but his role last week was awesome. Now, did it materialize in the fantasy points? No, it did not. But he was on the field for 26 of the 28 dropbacks. So that's really what we like to see of all the passing attempts. He basically ran every route. But like you look at it a little bit deeper, and this is where it gets really interesting. He led the team in targets, led the team in first read opportunities, had a 50% air yard share, and was top 5 in weighted opportunities in the NFL last week. So what that tells you is his role is really good in the offense. They got rid of Jonathan Mingo because they wanted to feature him to trade him. Somehow the Cowboys bid on that. Don't know why. Still don't know why to this day the Cowboys traded for Jonathan Mingo. Does not make sense. He's been one of the worst wide receivers in the NFL. But we saw the hints of it with Coker a few weeks before this, where he was starting to come on and he looked good in his role. He's that big power slot. It gets the one thing that does get interesting is Adam Thielen. But like let's play this out and be smart. Who do you want to feature? Do you want to feature the old guy where there's not much upside in his history? Because like he could move on after this year, even though I think he will be on the roster next year. They could move on from him because Adam Thielen did earn a ton of targets last year, but there was no one giving him any competition on this roster. With the additions of Xavier Leggett and Jalen Coker, they have the pieces to kind of build something with Bryce Young. And Bryce Young looks competent the last couple of weeks. So I think with Jalen Coker in his role, I'm curious to see how it works out if they mix and match all of these guys with Thielen coming back. But they haven't officially put him back on the roster yet. They've opened up his window. So we will see post-bye if he's on the roster and what it is. I just think Jalen Coker is a good player. And when there's good players, you want to grab them because usually when you bet on talent, the situation breaks right for you. And in particular, we're talking about a guy who's old as dirt, Mr. Adam Thielen. He's been a great NFL wide receiver, but interesting enough, he's kind of in that Jalen Coker mold where he's coming through from that progression where Thielen was basically nobody coming out of college, was just an afterthought, got on with the Vikings and slowly earned his way into playing a role. I'm not saying he's going to have the career Adam Thielen has, but he's following that trajectory right now, and we'll see how it goes for him. The other guys in this range, Elijah Moore, I think Elijah Moore is a really good bet if you want targets this week. They have a good matchup against the Saints. I like him. He's at 16%. Kayshon Boutte is interesting. Now, hear me out. He's at 2% of rosters. He's basically for across the board. Now, if you want to talk about Kayshon Boutte, what I will tell you is Kayshon Boutte was really good last week, and he has the potential to do it again. The last 3 weeks, he has seen 6 targets. And by the way, his snap percentage since week 6 has been 80% plus every week. So now it hasn't been the most efficient pathway for Kayshon Boutte, but he's still 22 years old. And if you remember a few years ago, people were insanely hyped about this guy and what he did. Now, that Patriots wide receiver core is abysmal. I like Jalen Polk a lot, but clearly it's not working out for Jalen Polk. So if you're getting the guy connected to Drake May, I like wide receivers connected to good young quarterbacks. That is Drake May. He's elevating this entire offense. Kayshon Boutte has a role, and I don't think it's going anywhere because we talk about Javon Baker, but Javon Baker's doing next to nothing. At least Jalen Polk's on the field, but it's not going well for him. They clearly like what they have with Kayshon Boutte right now. Now, Baker finally got on the field the last 2 weeks, but 6% of snaps. It's just he's clearly an afterthought. And whatever Kayshon Boutte is doing in that offense, they like him playing that role. So when we're in really deep leagues, I don't mind doing the Kayshon Boutte thing. Noah Brown's another interesting guy. If you remember Houston, he blew up a couple weeks last year. Noah Brown just in that wide receiver room, they need a secondary option. It seems like it's Noah Brown in Washington. If you look at his targets, 4 out of the last 5 weeks, he has 8 targets, 1 target in week 7. 6 targets, 6 targets, 7 targets. Now, he didn't have a blow-up game in week 8 against Chicago because he had the touchdown, right? But overall, he's been decent. He's getting enough targets, and that's really what's wrong because there's not much competition we talk about. When we look at this roster wide receiver, right? It's Terry McLaurin, it's Noah Brown, it's Diami Brown, pouring off for Diami Brown, another guy that the W community like, Olamide Zaccheaus, and Luke McCaffrey, right? This wide receiver core outside Terry McLaurin's not that good. So Noah Brown is just a solid NFL wide receiver, and there's really not much competition. So if you want to do the Noah Brown thing, you could do the Noah Brown thing. I think you could do worse than him. And the last guy, we're just throwing a dart on Jermaine Burton. He finally flashed last week against Baltimore. He started to show a little bit. And like we talk about bet on talented players, that's Jermaine Burton. If it doesn't hit, you can always discard it because it's 5% of roster. This is the bottom tier. It's why I like Jalen Coker a lot. The one guy that's not listed on here, which probably should be listed, which is my fault for not listing him because of the priors with him, is MVS. Now, if you want to look how MVS did in week 10, he led the team in snaps, the wide receiver position. He led them in routes run. He led them in targets. Obviously, he had monster plays against that. Now we know the MVS experience, but again, this is a wide receiver core that is depleted. There is minimal competition at all. We're talking, when you want to talk about the guys that played alongside with him, Mason Tipton, the artist formerly known as Dante Pettis, Jermaine Jackson, not the Jackson 5, Jermaine Jackson. Yes, Jermaine Jackson, NFL wide receiver, and Mason Tipton, right? So as much as I want to just kind of not do the MBS thing, we put out a post on Reddit and people were asking about MBS, and I was like, you know what? You're right. Dug into a little bit more. Yeah, that was my mistake. I overthought the process. So you can do the MVS thing. Like, you can do it if you want to do it. If you're desperate for production, I don't mind it. Now, the schedule is a little tough, so I'm not super bullish on him. But overall, like, Cleveland this week, they have a bye. Then you have the Rams. It gets a little bit better in weeks 14 against the Giants. You have Washington. And then Green Bay and Vegas really close out the season. So it's not the best schedule in the world. But overall, this is kind of what we were talking about with the Cleveland situation, where we didn't know how the wide receiver room was going to shake out. We're just like, invest in the players, right? Invest and see who kind of steps forward. MVS stepped forward week 1 with Derek Carr, with no Chris Olave. He might be out the rest of the year. We don't know how it's going to go. So you're really waiting to see. They've already lost Rashid Shaheed. They've lost a ton of wide receivers in that room. So this is why they brought in MVS. And hey, he's playing a role. So he is going to be a very boom bust wide receiver for you. More like a wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 weekly, but he has the upside because he's not a high-end targeter. Even this week, he only had 3 targets, right? But he can give you those spike weeks. So just think of a much, much worse version of the Jameson Williams and those guys. Like, that's what you're talking about here. In medium leagues, we're going to 26-50% of rosters. We are talking about Christian Watson, folks. I am back in on Christian Watson. He's at 47% of rosters. Now, you might be saying, oh, don't be telling me this Christian Watson stuff. Yeah, we're doing Christian Watson again here. You just bear with me a little bit on Christian Watson. Now, he's led the 2 weeks before the bye in weeks 8 and 9. He led the team in targets with 13. That's the most among all the wide receivers. Now, he didn't really hit for much of anything, but overall, that's what we want to see. We want to start earning targets. Now, they have Chicago. It's a tough matchup, but it does clear up a little bit. San Francisco's not the best matchup, not the worst matchup in the world, but it gets a little better. There's a pathway for him. And like we talk about with really good quarterbacks, like Jordan Love is a very good young quarterback. I want guys earning targets for him. So if you think it's going to be Romeo Doubs, he's available in the next year. You could do that. If you still want to do the Jaden Reed, those guys, absolutely. Jaden Reed's been awesome. He's been the one really wide receiver that they can trust in that offense. But talking about taking shots, people have talked about Bo Melton. We've talked about Dontavian Wicks. Like, we want wide receivers in that room. And if he steps forward, he keeps it going. Christian Watson has the weekly upside to be a guy that can hit 20 fantasy points for you a week. So it's worth taking a shot in the middle range tier. The other guys in here that I like, Demario Douglas, he's more of a floor play, but he's a consistent slot wide receiver for the New England Patriots. Drake May. It's really that simple. He's just a good NFL slot wide receiver. What's been weird with him this season is his usage has been very up or down and game script dependent. Certain matchups, they'll play him a lot. Other ones, they won't. So it's a risky floor play, but he's a good target earner. So when he's on the field, that happens. The next guy, Jalen McMillan, 47% of leagues. The interesting thing about last week is he was active, but he did not play a single snap. So clearly they wanted to play him. It did not work out for whatever reason. The injury was too difficult, so they just left him on the active roster. He unfortunately didn't play, so that's why you see the 0, but he didn't run a single snap. So with Jalen McMillan, I think he's better than all the other wide receivers they have, better than Raheem Jarrett, better than Sterling Shepard. The thing is, kind of like Miami, though, they're not heavily featuring their wide receiver room right now. It's like Cade Otton, and it's the running backs. That's how that was that. But we're talking about Baker Mayfield, who's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. And yeah, you did not hear that as a misprint. Like, Baker Mayfield's playing out of his mind this year. He's been fantastic. You saw that play when he was running, and Nick Bosa basically got his hands on him. He stiff arm him. Still threw a dime on the side. Like, Baker's showing you why he was drafted the first overall pick overall. He's been really good this year. I want the guy connected to Baker Mayfield. I'm expecting that to be Jalen McMillan. The injury has delayed that process. He still has that opportunity, so that's why we're going to do it. The next guy, Quentin Johnston. He's available in 28% of leagues. Similar to Christian Watson, he's a very boom-bust wide receiver. Like Quentin Johnston a couple weeks ago, he had that broken play touchdown, right? So that can always happen with Quentin Johnston, where he could break a big play for you. He has not earned over 6 targets in a game, but he's been kind of up or down. He's had 5, he's had 6, he's had 2, he's had 5, he's had 4, he's had 5, and he's had 2. So his targets have been all over the place. They get Cincy this week. Cincy's defense is terrible. They are one of the worst defenses in the NFL. They cannot stop anyone. They get gouged in the pass. Quentin Johnston could have a big game for you. So if you need production there. The next guy is Rashad Bateman. Rashad Bateman is starting to turn it on. Now, it's interesting when you look at Bateman and compare him to, say, Deontay Johnson. What I find fascinating is Bateman's really he's only 24 years old, so he's not old. He's not antique. He finally seems like he's cleared past the injury part of his career where he was just dealing with injuries nonstop. And he's turning into a quality NFL wide receiver. Now, last week against Cincinnati, He had 6 receptions, 54 yards, and a touchdown. Like, that's a pretty good performance, right? But overall, he's been consistently involved in this passing attack as he's over 500 yards receiving on the year. Like, he has a couple touchdowns. I think he's fine for you. I'm a little bit worried. They have 2 bad matchups. You have Pittsburgh, they have the Chargers back-to-back weeks, and then Philly is the third week. So it's 3 tough matchups in a row. All these defenses are trending in the right direction. If they're not the best defense in the NFL, they're right alongside there. What worries me a little bit is Deontay, where we've heard Harbaugh come out and say they're going to involve Deontay more moving forward. What does that mean for him? We don't know. How much does that impact the other pass catchers in that offense? That's what I'm waiting to see. But if Deontay's on the field in 2 wide receiver sets, if it's him and Zay Flowers, makes it real difficult for Rashad Bateman. So Bateman's a speculative buy at this price, but 31% of leagues, you could do worse than him. And last but not least, we're doing the shallow tiered roster guys. And what the heck, what's going on here? Cedric Tillman, 3 weeks before the bye, is the wide receiver 2 in expected points and overall points from week 7 to 9, the wide receiver 2 in fantasy. And his rostership percentage went from 68 to 67 last week. And I'm like, why are people not picking? They're actually dropping Cedric Tillman. And I'm like, do you not realize, like, Tillman's been awesome across the board? So I know more likely he's not available in your league, but the fact that his rostership percentage went down a little bit, you should absolutely do this. The other 2 guys, I want both the San Francisco 49ers wide receivers. Juwan Jennings, both Tillman and Jennings are true difference-making wide receivers, I believe. I love both of them. I want them on the roster. So if by perchance they're available, go drop a ton of fat on those guys. Ricky Pearsall is the guy that's the least owned of that group. He's 55% roster. Those are the big 3 of this tier. They're available. I want you to snag all of those guys because Ricky Pearsall is a good guy that wins consistently against man coverage. They don't have that. Now, Juwan Jennings has been really good against zone. He's still good against man, but he's been crushing against zone. Ricky Pearsall is going to be the guy that wins more against man coverage. So they kind of yin and yang and work well together. He's going to be inside out. I just think Ricky Pearsall is a really good player. And guess what? The crowded wide receiver room ain't so crowded anymore, right? Ayuk is gone. Like, they have Debo's dealing with injuries. Like, McCaffrey's back. But overall, there's a pathway for both of these guys to be fancy viable for you. So, yeah, absolutely. The other guy, Jerry Jeudy, 61% of rostership. Now, I don't know why Jerry Jeudy is at 61% and Elijah Moore's at 16%, because Jerry Judy's been a decent role, just more disappointing. But we want the Cleveland wide receivers because they're going to pass it a ton with Jameis Winston. That's why we like him. He's going to get the targets. You're talking double-digit target potential duties every week. It's there for you. This week, they have the best matchup they do the rest of the year. It's against the Saints this week. So if you want to do it with Jeudy this week, I'm fine with it. But overall, it's a lot tougher with Jeudy because I'm more buying into Tillman and believing what Tillman has shown versus the other guys. And the last guy in this tier, Romeo Doubs, 66%. Like we talk about, Doubs has been consistent in that offense. He has a role. He got past whatever hiccup he had with his role in the offense where he missed some time, he left. Ever since he's come back, he's had no less than 4 targets in a game. And, you know, he's been solid. So I don't mind Romeo Doubs. He's got 400 yards on the year, 30 receptions. He's been fine. You can do it. You have Chicago, like we talk about, this matchups are a little tougher. Clears up a little bit, but yeah, I don't mind him as well. So those are the wide receivers.